The insistent honking of horns was a discordant symphony against the backdrop of the city's relentless hum. Adrian Mikhailov, encased in the supple leather of his Maybach, felt the familiar prickle of irritation. Los Angeles traffic, the great equalizer, had ensnared even him, the man who commanded skyscrapers and moved markets with a phone call. Beside him, Sofia Volkov, sleek and luminous in a crimson dress, idly swiped through her phone, a picture of serene indifference to the urban chaos. The late afternoon sun, a molten orb sinking towards the Pacific, cast long shadows across the gridlocked lanes. Adrian's gaze, sharp and restless, drifted out the window. He saw the usual tableau: frustrated commuters drumming fingers on steering wheels, delivery cyclists weaving precariously through the stagnant flow, a lone street vendor hawking wilting bouquets. Then his breath hitched. On the crowded sidewalk, near the entrance of a bustling cafe, a woman stumbled. Her hand flew to her abdomen, a gesture so instinctively protective that it snagged Adrian's attention. She was slender, her once vibrant floral dress now hanging loosely on her frame. Her dark hair, usually styled with a casual elegance he remembered so well, was disheveled, strands clinging to her pale forehead. His mind, usually a steel trap of strategies and acquisitions, faltered. There was something achingly familiar about her gait, the slump of her shoulders. He squinted, willing the distance and the blurring effect of the tinted window to dissipate. Then she crumpled. One moment she was there, a struggling figure against the vibrant backdrop of the city, and the next she was a heap on the concrete. A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Time seemed to warp. The cacophony of the traffic faded, replaced by a sudden, deafening silence in Adrian's ears. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He knew that fall. He knew the vulnerability etched in that collapsing form. "Adrian?" Sophia's voice, laced with a touch of impatience, finally broke through the fog in his mind. "Are we going to be stuck here all day?" He barely registered her presence. His eyes remained fixed on the scene unfolding outside. People were converging on the fallen woman, their faces a mixture of concern and alarm. And then he saw her face, illuminated for a fleeting moment, as a bystander knelt beside her. Isabella. The name exploded in his consciousness, a raw, visceral shock that sent a tremor through his entire being. Isabella. His Isabella. His ex-wife. He hadn't seen her in over a year, not since the acrimonious finalization of their divorce, a severance he had orchestrated with ruthless efficiency. He hadn't allowed himself to think about her, burying the memories under layers of work and the superficial gloss of his new life. Now, here she was, vulnerable and prone on a public sidewalk, and the protective gesture before she fell, it clicked into place with a sickening certainty. Pregnant. Isabella was pregnant. A cold dread washed over him, eclipsing the initial shock. He had to get to her. Now, without a word to Sophia, Adrian shoved his door open, the sudden movement causing her to jump. "I have to go," he said, his voice rough, already halfway out of the car. "Go. Adrian, what are you doing? We have that meeting." Her voice trailed off as she saw the stark urgency in his eyes, the color draining from his face. He didn't answer, weaving through the stalled cars, his expensive Italian loafers pounding on the asphalt. The world narrowed to the small knot of people surrounding Isabella. He pushed his way through, his imposing frame parting the concerned onlookers. "Let me through," he commanded, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. He knelt beside her. Her face was ashen, her lips slightly blue. Her eyes were closed, and a faint sheen of perspiration dotted her forehead. A young woman was gently trying to rouse her, her voice a low murmur of concern. "Isabella," Adrian said, his voice surprisingly shaky. He reached out a hand, hesitated for a fraction of a second, then gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. The feel of its silken texture sent a jolt of forgotten intimacy through him. Her eyelids fluttered open. Her eyes, the warm hazel pools he had once lost himself in, were clouded with confusion, then widened in stunned disbelief as they focused on him. "Adrian?" Her voice was a mere whisper, fragile and laced with pain. The crowd around them had fallen silent, sensing the unexpected connection between the impeccably dressed millionaire and the seemingly distressed woman. Phones were already appearing, their lenses aimed at the unfolding drama. "We need to get her to a hospital," Adrian said, his voice regaining its authoritative edge. He looked around, his gaze sweeping over the onlookers. "Someone call an ambulance." As someone in the crowd fumbled for their phone, Adrian carefully scooped Isabella into his arms. She was lighter than he remembered, her frailty a sharp indictment of his neglect. Her head lolled against his chest, and he could feel the faint tremor that ran through her body. The cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing the surreal scene. The billionaire, his face a mask of grim determination, carrying his pregnant, collapsed ex-wife through the throng of curious onlookers. Sophia watched from the car, her expression unreadable, a storm gathering behind her perfectly composed facade. Adrian didn't care about the cameras, about the whispers that were surely spreading like wildfire through the city's digital veins. All that mattered was the fragile life he held in his arms, the woman he had once loved and carelessly discarded, now carrying a secret that had the power to unravel everything he had so meticulously built. His next move, the one that would ripple through the stunned crowd and far beyond, was already forming in his mind, born of a sudden, terrifying realization. He had made a catastrophic mistake. Years ago, the roar of the city had sounded different to Isabella. It was a symphony of opportunity, a vibrant backdrop to the burgeoning love she shared with Adrian. They had met in a cramped university library, two souls drawn together by shared dreams and an undeniable spark. He was a driven immigrant, his mind sharp, his ambition burning bright beneath a quiet intensity. She was a whirlwind of warmth and unwavering belief in his potential. Their early years were a tapestry woven with shared struggles and small victories. Ramen dinners tasted like feasts when eaten together in their tiny apartment. Late nights spent poring over business plans felt like adventures, fueled by cheap coffee and the intoxicating promise of a future they would build together. Isabella had been his rock, his confidant, the one who saw the brilliance in his sometimes ruthless drive. She had worked tirelessly to support them both, her own aspirations often taking a back seat to his soaring ambitions. She remembered the day he had landed his first major real estate deal. The pure, unadulterated joy on his face, the way he had swept her into a celebratory embrace, their laughter echoing in their humble living room. Those were the moments she had cherished, the foundation upon which she had built her faith in their future. But as Adrian's empire grew, so did the distance between them. The late nights studying blueprints turned into late nights at the office, then late nights at exclusive business dinners. The shared dreams began to feel like her dreams alone. The man she had fallen in love with, the intense, vulnerable Adrian, was slowly being eclipsed by Adrian Mikhailov, the self-made billionaire. A man increasingly shielded by a wall of success and demanding perfection. The subtle shifts had been insidious. A clipped tone on the phone, a distracted gaze during their rare dinners, a growing impatience with her concerns. He spoke of pressure, of the relentless demands of his industry, and she had tried to understand, to be supportive, just as she had always been. But the emotional intimacy they once shared began to erode, replaced by polite inquiries and surface-level conversations. Then came Sophia. The whispers started subtly. Elegant women with knowing glances at charity events, hushed conversations that ceased abruptly when she approached. Isabella had dismissed them, clinging to the belief in her husband, in the foundation of their love. But the doubts had burrowed in, tiny seeds of suspicion that eventually bloomed into a bitter, undeniable truth. The confrontation had been brief, brutal. Adrian hadn't denied it. He had simply stated, with a cold detachment that had chilled her to the bone, that things had changed, that they were no longer compatible, that a divorce was the most logical step. Logic. That was the currency of his new world, a world where emotions were seen as weaknesses and relationships were transactional. He had offered her a generous settlement, a gilded cage of financial security that felt like a profound insult. Pride, sharp and stinging, had dictated her response. She had refused most of it, wanting nothing that tied her to the man who had so casually dismantled their life. She had walked away with a fraction of what she was entitled to, clutching her dignity like a shield against the crushing weight of betrayal. She had tried to rebuild, to piece together the fragments of her shattered life. She found a small, affordable apartment, took on freelance design work, and tried to ignore the ache in her heart. But the ghost of their shared past haunted her, a constant reminder of what she had lost. Then had come the unexpected miracle, the tiny seed of new life that had begun to grow within her. It had been a shock, a confusing mix of fear and overwhelming joy. Adrian didn't know. She had intended to keep it that way, a secret fiercely guarded, a new beginning that belonged only to her. But life, it seemed, had other plans. The stress of trying to make ends meet, the gnawing anxiety about the future, the lack of proper nutrition, it had all taken its toll. The faintness had started weeks ago, brief, dizzy spells she had tried to ignore. Today, the world had simply tilted, and the darkness had swallowed her whole. Now, as she lay cradled in Adrian's arms, the familiar scent of his expensive cologne filling her nostrils, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over her. Relief at the immediate danger passing, confusion at his unexpected presence, and a deep, buried resentment that flickered like a stubborn ember. His touch, the strength of his arms beneath her, stirred a ghost of the tenderness she had once known. But it was overlaid with the bitter taste of abandonment, the memory of his cold words echoing in her mind. What was he doing here? Why now? The question swirled in her head, unanswered and unsettling, as the flashing lights of the approaching ambulance painted the chaotic scene in stark, surreal hues. The sterile scent of antiseptic stung Adrian's nostrils, a stark contrast to the lingering perfume of Sophia that still clung faintly to his suit. He paced the waiting room of the emergency department, his usual composure fractured by a raw, gnawing anxiety he hadn't felt in years. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the worn linoleum floor. He had insisted on following the ambulance, his Maybach trailing the wailing siren like a shadow of his former life. Sophia had remained at the scene, a statuesque figure amidst the fading commotion, her expression still unreadable. He had offered a curt explanation. "It's Isabella." Before leaving, his mind solely focused on the woman he now knew carried his child. The doctor's words, delivered with professional detachment, echoed in his ears. Dehydration, malnourishment, stress. And the confirmation, delivered with a sympathetic gaze, that Isabella was indeed pregnant. It was his child. There was no doubt in his mind. He remembered their last few months together, the careless intimacy amidst the growing distance, the lack of precautions born of habit, and a naive assumption of their shared future. Guilt, sharp and visceral, twisted in his gut. He had provided lavishly for her during their marriage, showering her with material possessions. Yet, here she was, pregnant with his child, collapsing on a public street due to basic neglect. The irony was brutal, a damning indictment of his priorities. Finally, a nurse approached him, her smile tired but kind. "Mr. Mikhailov? Ms. Navarro is awake now. The doctor would like to speak with you both." He followed her down the brightly lit corridor, his heart pounding with a mixture of apprehension and a desperate need to see her, to ensure she was all right. He paused outside her room, taking a deep breath to compose himself before entering. Isabella lay in the hospital bed, pale but conscious. Her eyes, shadowed with fatigue, held a guarded wariness as they met his. A small bandage adorned her forehead, where she had apparently hit the ground. The doctor, a middle-aged woman with a reassuring demeanor, addressed them both. "Ms. Navarro is stable now, but she's severely malnourished and dehydrated. We're running some further tests to ensure the baby is doing well." She paused, her gaze shifting between Adrian and Isabella. "It's crucial that Ms. Navarro gets proper rest and nutrition. Her current living situation is not conducive to a healthy pregnancy." Isabella's chin lifted slightly, a flash of her old pride returning. "I'm managing," she said, her voice still weak but carrying a hint of defiance. Adrian stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Isabella. "Where are you living, Isabella?" Her eyes flickered away, a blush rising on her pale cheeks. "It's not important," he pressed, his voice firm but laced with concern. "Isabella, please. The doctor said—" "I heard what the doctor said," she interrupted, her voice sharper now. "I'll figure things out." He knew that stubborn set of her jaw. She wouldn't ask for help, especially not from him. But he couldn't stand by and watch her struggle, not anymore. "Isabella," he said, his voice softer this time, filled with a raw sincerity he hadn't allowed himself to express in a long time. "Please let me help you." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding their hazel depths. "Help me? After everything?" The unspoken accusations hung heavy in the sterile air. He knew he deserved her anger, her distrust. "Yes," he said simply, meeting her gaze unflinchingly. "After everything. Because this is my child too, Isabella." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by a wave of emotion he couldn't quite decipher. Hurt, anger, perhaps even a sliver of vulnerability. "You didn't care about me enough to stay," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Why would you care about this baby?" "That's not true," he countered, his voice low and urgent. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I never stopped caring about you, Isabella. And now there's this. Our child." "Don't pretend," she said, her voice laced with bitterness. "You have Sophia. You have your life. This doesn't fit into your perfect world, Adrian." Her words hit him like a physical blow. He saw the pain in her eyes, the deep hurt that his actions had inflicted. He knew he couldn't erase the past, but he had to try to build a different future. For her and for their child. "Sophia is... It's not what you think," he began, then stopped. He wasn't going to lie. Their relationship had been a convenient arrangement, a reflection of his superficial success, but it held none of the depth or genuine connection he had once shared with Isabella. "Regardless of Sophia," he continued, his voice firm, "I will take responsibility for our child, and I want to help you, Isabella. Not because I feel obligated, but because it's the right thing to do. Because I don't want to lose you both." Her gaze remained skeptical, her arms crossed protectively over her abdomen. The emotional walls she had built around herself were high and formidable. "Where were you living?" he asked again, his voice gentle but persistent. She hesitated, then finally relented, her voice barely above a whisper. "My car." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His Isabella, the woman he had promised a lifetime of security and love, was living in her car, pregnant and alone. The shame and guilt were almost unbearable. "Isabella," he said, his voice thick with emotion. That's not acceptable. Not anymore." He turned to the doctor. "Please ensure Miss Navarro receives the best possible care. I will take care of everything." He looked back at Isabella, his eyes pleading, "Please let me make this right." Her expression remained guarded, but he saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a fragile hope battling against years of hurt and distrust. The road to redemption would be long and arduous, he knew, but for the first time in a long time, Adrian Mikhailov felt a sense of purpose beyond the acquisition of wealth and power. He had a family to fight for, a chance to reclaim the love he had so carelessly lost, and he wouldn't let it slip away again. The days that followed in the sterile confines of the hospital were fraught with a tense, unspoken truce. Adrian visited Isabella daily, his presence a constant, if not entirely welcome fixture in her room. He brought her healthy meals, stacks of books, and tried to engage her in gentle conversation, careful to avoid topics that might trigger old wounds. Isabella remained wary, her responses measured, her eyes often holding a distant quality that reminded him of the vast chasm he had created between them. Yet, beneath the surface, he sensed a flicker of curiosity, a reluctant acknowledgement of his efforts. One afternoon, as he sat beside her, the silence stretching between them, Isabella finally broke the quiet. "Why are you really doing this, Adrian?" Her voice was soft but direct, her gaze unwavering. "You said you felt responsible, but there's more to it, isn't there?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. He knew she deserved honesty, even if it was painful. "When I saw you collapse, Isabella, it was like a punch to the gut. Not just because you were hurt, but because I realized the extent of my blindness. I was so consumed by building my empire, by chasing success, that I lost sight of what truly mattered." He hesitated, searching for the right words to articulate the tangled mess of his emotions. "You were my partner, Isabella. You supported me when I had nothing. You believed in me when no one else did. And I took that for granted. I let ambition consume me, and in the process, I pushed you away. Sophia, it was a distraction, a symbol of the superficial life I had created. It was never real." Isabella listened intently, her expression unreadable. "You chose that life, Adrian," she said finally, her voice devoid of emotion. "You chose Sophia. You chose your work." "I know," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "And I was wrong. Terribly wrong. Seeing you there, so vulnerable, and knowing you were carrying our child, living in your car, it shattered the illusion of the life I thought I wanted." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. She didn't pull away, but her fingers remained still, offering no warmth in return. "I want to be a father to this child, Isabella, and I want to earn back your trust, if that's even possible." A bitter smile touched her lips. "Trust is a fragile thing, Adrian. You broke it completely." He nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me easily. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that I've changed, that I can be the man you once believed in." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Isabella's cousin, Marina, a vivacious woman with a sharp tongue and a fiercely protective nature, entered the room. Her eyes narrowed as they landed on Adrian. "What are you doing here?" Marina's voice was cool, her tone accusatory. Isabella sighed softly. Marina, he's the reason you were in that state in the first place, Marina interjected, her gaze fixed on Adrian with unconcealed hostility. He abandoned you, Isabella. He chose his money and his mistress over you. Adrian met Marina's gaze, acknowledging the validity of her anger. Marina, I understand your feelings. I hurt Isabella deeply, and I regret it more than words can say. Regret? Marina scoffed. Regret doesn't put food on the table or a roof over her head when she's pregnant with your child. Isabella placed a hand on her cousin's arm. Marina, please. Adrian is helping me now. Helping you? Marina's eyebrows shot up. After all this time? Suddenly he decides to play the hero. It's not like that, Isabella said, her voice weary. She looked at Adrian. Tell her. Adrian took a deep breath and explained the situation. The discovery of Isabella's pregnancy, her living conditions, his desire to support her and their child. Marina listened, her expression softening slightly but still laced with skepticism. Why now, Adrian? What's changed? I've changed, he said simply. Becoming successful didn't bring me the happiness I thought it would. I realized I was alone, and I understood the magnitude of what I had lost. Seeing Isabella, it was a wake-up call. Marina remained unconvinced. Don't think you can just waltz back into her life and fix everything with your money, Adrian. She's not the same woman you left behind. I know that too, Adrian said, his gaze returning to Isabella. And I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I just want a chance to be there for my child and to earn Isabella's forgiveness. The tension in the room remained thick, a palpable reminder of the deep wounds of the past. Marina's presence served as a stark reminder of the pain Adrian had inflicted, the protective circle Isabella had been forced to rely on in his absence. His path to redemption would not only involve Isabella, but also overcoming the skepticism and resentment of those who loved her. The results of the further tests came back, confirming what Adrian already suspected. Isabella's precarious health had been exacerbated by stress and lack of resources. The baby, thankfully, appeared to be unharmed, a tiny miracle amidst the turmoil. Adrian insisted that Isabella remain in the hospital for a few more days, under observation and receiving proper nutrition. He took care of all the arrangements, his efficient assistant, Dimitri, handling the paperwork with quiet competence. One evening, as Adrian sat by Isabella's bedside, a comfortable silence settled between them. The harsh fluorescent lights had been dimmed, casting the room in a softer glow. Thank you, Adrian, Isabella said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. For everything. The hospital. The doctors. He looked at her, a warmth spreading through his chest at her unexpected gratitude. You don't have to thank me, Isabella. It's the least I can do. No, she insisted, her gaze meeting his. It's more than that. I know it's not easy for you to be here. With Sophia, he hesitated for a moment, then decided to be completely honest. Sophia and we're done, Isabella. I ended it. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. When? The day I saw you, he said. It became clear to me that I couldn't continue living a lie. My priorities have shifted, Isabella. My focus is on you and our child. Another silence descended, this one less tense, more contemplative. Isabella's hand rested lightly on her abdomen, a protective gesture he had noticed her make frequently. You really want this? She asked, her voice tinged with a mixture of hope and disbelief. To be a father? He reached out and gently placed his hand over hers, feeling the faint curve of her growing belly beneath his palm. A profound sense of connection, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, washed over him. More than anything, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I want to be there for our child, to be a part of their life. And I want a chance to be a part of yours again too, Isabella. Not as before, perhaps, but something real. Tears welled in her eyes, and she looked away, her emotions clearly close to the surface. It's not that simple, Adrian. You hurt me so deeply. The trust, it's gone. I know, he repeated, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. And I understand if you can never forgive me completely. But I'm willing to work for it, Isabella, to earn back even a fraction of the trust I lost. She finally looked back at him, her eyes filled with a raw vulnerability that pierced his heart. It scares me, Adrian, letting you back in. What if you change your mind again? What if this is just a temporary reaction to seeing me like that? I won't, he said, his voice firm and resolute. This isn't a fleeting feeling, Isabella. This is a realization, a long overdue one. I was so focused on building a material empire that I neglected the most important things in my life. You were the most important thing, Isabella. And now, you and our child are my priority. He watched her, his heart in his throat, waiting for her reaction. Her expression was a complex tapestry of emotions. Doubt, longing, a flicker of hope. What kind of future do you envision, Adrian? She asked finally, her voice hesitant. He thought for a moment, picturing a life he hadn't allowed himself to imagine before. A future where our child is loved and secure, where we are both present in their life. As for us, I don't know. I know I have a lot to prove, but I hope that maybe, just maybe, we can find a way to be a family again. Not necessarily the way we were, but a new kind of family, built on honesty and a shared love for our child. The unspoken words hung in the air between them, the weight of their past, the uncertainty of their future. But for the first time since their painful separation, a fragile bridge seemed to be forming across the chasm of their broken relationship, built on the unexpected foundation of their unborn child. Leaving the sterile environment of the hospital and stepping into the meticulously designed but ultimately impersonal apartment Adrian had hastily arranged for her, felt surreal for Isabella. It was spacious, luxurious, equipped with everything she could possibly need, a stark contrast to the cramped confines of her car. Yet it felt like another gilded cage, albeit a much more comfortable one. Adrian had been insistent, explaining that it was not a permanent arrangement, but a safe and comfortable space for her to rest and prepare for the baby's arrival. He had hired a part-time nurse to assist her during the initial days and had stocked the refrigerator with healthy, nourishing food. His efforts were undeniable, his concern seemingly genuine. Yet, a part of Isabella remained guarded, watching him with a wary eye. Could he truly change? Could the man who had so easily dismissed her from his life now embrace this new reality? The memories of his coldness, his detachment, were still too vivid, too painful to ignore. Adrian's presence in her new temporary home was a careful dance. He visited every evening after work, his tailored suits a stark contrast to the comfortable clothes she now favored. He would inquire about her health, the baby, and share snippets of his day, his tone polite, respectful, almost tentative. He even attempted to cook for her one evening, a gesture that was both endearing and slightly comical. His usually precise movements became clumsy in the kitchen, resulting in a burnt frittata and a smoke alarm that shrieked through the otherwise silent apartment. Isabella, despite herself, had chuckled, a sound that brought a genuine smile to Adrian's face. These small moments of normalcy, of shared humanity, chipped away slightly at the wall of ice surrounding her heart. She saw a vulnerability in him she hadn't witnessed before, a hesitant uncertainty that belied his usual confidence. He started attending her prenatal appointments, sitting quietly in the waiting room, his presence drawing curious glances from the other expectant couples. He listened attentively to the doctor's instructions, his questions thoughtful and concerned. Seeing him there, his hand resting gently on her stomach during an ultrasound, stirred a complicated mix of emotions within her. A flicker of the love she had once felt, a hesitant hope for the future, and a lingering fear of disappointment. The outside world, however, refused to let their fragile truce exist in a vacuum. The paparazzi, fueled by the initial dramatic encounter and Adrian's subsequent involvement in Isabella's life, hounded them relentlessly. Tabloid headlines screamed about the millionaire's secret baby and the reunion romance. Sophia, too, remained a looming presence. Isabella received a text message from her one afternoon, a curt and cutting remark about Adrian's sudden philanthropic endeavors. The message, though brief, was a sharp reminder of Adrian's past and the complications it brought to their present. Adrian, sensing Isabella's unease, addressed the Sophia situation directly. "I told you, Isabella, it's over between us. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. My relationship with Sophia was a mistake, a symptom of a life that lacked real substance." He admitted that Sophia had been angry, hurt, and unwilling to accept his decision gracefully. He had had to be firm, severing all ties to his previous life. His honesty was a balm to Isabella's insecurities, but the knowledge that Sophia was still out there, a potential source of drama, lingered in the back of her mind. One evening, as Adrian was leaving, Isabella stopped him at the door. "Adrian," she said softly, her gaze searching his. "Why didn't you ever try to find me after the divorce? You knew I hadn't taken much of the settlement. Didn't you ever wonder how I was doing?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of his neglect. Adrian's usual composure faltered. He looked away for a moment, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "Yes," he admitted, his voice low. "I did. But my pride got in the way. I told myself you were better off without me, that you would rebuild your life, and I was afraid of facing what I had done, afraid of your anger." His vulnerability surprised her. It was rare for Adrian to admit weakness, to peel back the layers of his carefully constructed persona. "I wasn't better off, Adrian," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I was heartbroken and alone." He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his gaze filled with a raw sincerity. "I know, Isabella, and I am so sorry. I can't undo the past, but I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." As he left that night, Isabella stood by the window, watching his car disappear into the city lights. The emotional walls around her heart remained, but she had to admit they were beginning to feel less impenetrable, more like a fortress under a slow, steady siege of genuine remorse and unexpected tenderness. Despite Adrian's efforts to shield Isabella from the negativity, the whispers and shadows of his past continued to intrude on their fragile new reality. Gossip columns and online forums buzzed with speculation about his rekindled interest in his ex-wife, fueled by paparazzi shots of their hospital visits and his presence at her new apartment. Sophia, nursing her wounded pride and fueled by a desire for revenge, became a shadowy antagonist. Her presence felt more than seen. Anonymous tips were leaked to the press, painting Isabella as a gold digger who had deliberately become pregnant to ensnare the wealthy Adrian Mikhailov. The rumors stung Isabella, dredging up old insecurities and fueling her distrust. She confronted Adrian, her voice tight with anger and hurt. "Is this your doing, Adrian? Are you trying to discredit me?" He looked at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and frustration. "Isabella, no. You know I would never do that. This is Sophia. She's trying to retaliate." He showed her the hateful comments online, the fabricated stories in the tabloids. Isabella felt a wave of nausea wash over her. The scrutiny, the judgment of strangers, was suffocating. Adrian, seeing her distress, took swift action. His legal team issued stern cease and desist letters to the publications peddling the false narratives. He gave a brief, carefully worded statement to a reputable news outlet, acknowledging his reconciliation with Isabella and his commitment to their unborn child, without divulging the intimate details of their past. His public defense of her, his willingness to stand by her in the face of public scrutiny, was a significant gesture, one that didn't go unnoticed by Isabella. It was a stark contrast to his silence during their marriage, when faced with similar, albeit less malicious, gossip. Privately, Adrian confessed his worry about Sophia's potential for further disruption. He admitted that her connections in the city were vast, and that she was not one to back down easily. His concern, though unsettling, also felt genuine. Another crack in the wall Isabella had built around her heart. One afternoon, Marina visited Isabella, her usual fiery energy subdued. She had seen the news, the online comments, and was fiercely protective of her cousin. "Isabella, are you sure about this? About Adrian?" Marina's voice was filled with worry. "He hurt you so badly before. What if this is just a temporary phase? What if he gets bored again?" Isabella sighed, running a hand over her growing belly. "I don't know, Marina. I'm scared too. But I see a different side of him now. He's trying, really trying. And I have to think about the baby. Our baby deserves to know his father." "But you deserve happiness too, Isabella," Marina insisted. "Don't settle for anything less." "I know," Isabella said softly. "And I'm not settling. I'm proceeding with caution, Marina. But I have to give him a chance, for the baby's sake, and maybe, just maybe, for my own." The shadows of the past, the whispers of doubt, still lingered, threatening to engulf their fragile hope. But in the quiet moments, in Adrian's gentle touch and his unwavering gaze, Isabella began to see a glimmer of a different future, one where redemption was possible, and love, however bruised, might still have a chance to bloom again. The approaching storm mirrored the unease that had settled over Isabella in recent days. The sky outside her window had turned a bruised purple, and the wind howled like a restless spirit. She was in her 35th week of pregnancy, and the Braxton Hicks contractions had become more frequent, more intense. Adrian was away on a last-minute business trip to New York, something that had filled Isabella with a familiar sense of anxiety. He had promised to be back within 24 hours, assuring her that his assistant, Dimitri, was on standby should she need anything. But the timing felt ominous, the storm outside a physical manifestation of her inner turmoil. As the evening wore on, the contractions intensified, becoming rhythmic and undeniably painful. Fear coiled in her stomach, a cold knot that had nothing to do with the approaching storm. This felt different. She tried to remain calm, remembering the breathing exercises she had learned in her birthing class. But the pain was relentless, each wave washing over her with increasing ferocity. Finally, her fear overriding her reluctance to bother Adrian while he was away, she called Dimitri. Dimitri's voice was calm and efficient on the other end of the line. He immediately dispatched the nurse who had been checking on Isabella and promised to contact Adrian. The nurse arrived within minutes, her experienced hands quickly assessing the situation, her brow furrowed with concern. "These contractions are quite strong, Isabella, and they're coming very close together. We need to get you to the hospital. Panic flared in Isabella's chest. Not yet. It was too early. Adrian wasn't here. The drive to the hospital was a blur of flashing ambulance lights and the nurse's reassuring voice. The storm raged outside, rain lashing against the windows, the wind buffeting the vehicle. Isabella clutched her abdomen, her breath coming in ragged gasps. At the hospital, she was rushed into an examination room. The doctors confirmed her worst fears. She was in preterm labor. The stress, the earlier malnourishment, had taken their toll. As the medical team prepared her for delivery, Isabella's mind raced. Adrian. She needed Adrian. Dmitri had managed to reach him, his voice filled with urgency. Adrian was on the first flight back, but the storm had grounded planes, and the estimated time of his arrival was uncertain. Lying in the sterile,